Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Anatoly Akimets. I'm Product Marketing Manager in Elastic Path, and I'm excited to welcome you to a joint Elastic Path and Amplience webinar. The topic of today's webinar is how B2B businesses can benefit from going headless. Today we have three great speakers. We have Darren Archer, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Elastic Path. Darren has been working with Adobe and IBM before joining Elastic Path, and here he is responsible for the marketing strategy of the company. We have James Brook, who is CEO and co-founder of Amplience, and who has been at the forefront of dynamic media and digital solutions for over 20 years. And we have John Williams, who is CTO of Amplience, and who is responsible for research and development at Amplience. Now a couple of words about how the agenda looks like. There are 4 sections. First, we will take a look at the market, on how enterprises are going digital. We will talk about new business models, omnichannel experiences, collaborative buying. Then we will give some examples of how real-world customers are addressing these challenges with the headless commerce and content solutions. Then we will dig deeper into how headless creates value and how it addresses these challenges. And we will do a showcase of joint Elastic Path and Amplience solution. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where we will answer any outstanding questions. At this point, Darren, over to you.
Thanks, Anatoly. Hello, everyone. Excited to be connecting with you all and participating in this webinar and participating with our partner, Amplience. You know, this space we're in right now, we've seen a ton of change in the commerce industry, and much of it has always been led by technology shifts and patterns that have occurred from, you know, just the early days of the ability to provide some kind of electronic commerce experience to other marketing experiences. Then, you know, the invention of mobile smartphones and the need to shift to various mobile experiences. And now we're, you know, really entering this era where the experiences cross almost any kind of audio, visual type of technology. And I think it's one of those topics where a lot of it's just starting with what does that mean, and what are the expectations of your end buyers that can make up a number of different types of personas that now you have to focus in on in a way where the expectations, frankly, have kind of gone through the roof. If you think of how we've been able to educate our markets, our buyers in the past, you know, it might have been okay to be carrying around big binders with content, or even leaving behind huge binders that you know, a salesman might run around with in their trunk. And then we went through, you know, a little bit of digitization where we kind of PDF'd those binders, right? We started to create an electronic version of that copy that became very static. And it would be, you know, a catalog, information about our products, various services that we have, even how to engage with our businesses. And now there's this expectation that, you know, someone can engage with all that content, perhaps through, you know, an Alexa Dot or a headset, or their wearable device, or, you know, certainly your traditional web browser experience and mobile phones, etc. But the thing that I think is really pushing us the most right now is that we're in a place where nearly half of buyers are from a generation where Google has always been around. So think about that. They've always had kind of almost unlimited information at their fingertips. And the same buyers now that are influencing a great deal of all of our revenues have carried an internet communicator their entire professional life. So they've had a smartphone, they've had access to data in just a radically different way than buyers did in the past. And so then it kind of comes down to, how are we going to take advantage of not only the technologies that do exist today and the types of experiences we can create, but best serve the expectations of these buyers that also are increasingly expecting, very consumer-like experiences that they have in their day-to-day purchasing and their day-to-day lives. So some of the exciting things that we've seen on the Elastic Path side and throughout the industry and working with partners such as Amplience is a lot of new business models. And a lot of these business models are driving some of these experience requirements. Clearly, IoT type use cases, if you think about a manufacturer starting to embed sensors in some of their products, that's kind of a step one that we've seen begin to actually take hold over the last few years. But now it's taken that next step forward and looking at, can it initiate service tickets? Can it facilitate warranty checks? Can devices have replenishment triggered based on what the parts and equipment actually can have? But also the way we sell and who we sell through, who participates in those sales, whether it's early on from a marketing standpoint or all the way through the transaction as a reseller or distributor, value-added reseller might do, that relationship is a number of tiers, and how we then interact with those customers requires a lot of different experiences, and also an expectation that regardless of that touch point that a buyer might have with our business, there's consistency in the information, whether it's information about a given product or service, but also core things like pricing and perhaps even promotional type deals, spiffs, etc., that we may be making available to the market. So the impact on how we present ourselves electronically, digitally, from a commerce and content perspective is, it's really no longer okay to just have that binder be electronic and make people download PDFs to get product information, right? Or navigate sites and experiences that then they can't transact on. They've got to pick up the phone or go through another partner. The other big shift is really accepting and taking advantage of the diverse number of people that actually have to be informed, participate in a decision, and can engage your business through the entire purchase cycle and even post-sale, how you interact with them in those expectations from the post-sale perspective. And so what we're seeing is this, very collaborative buying type environment. And when you start to bring a number of these folks to the table, it also means that they are, they have various expectations depending on where they are, what they, what devices they might use, how they interact with your channel. So James, tell us a little bit about kind of, what you're seeing, because I think you guys are seeing a lot of this opportunity where we're making this shift, particularly in the B2B space from, the PDF era, right, where it was okay to kind of throw up a PDF or leave the binder behind, to, rich content being delivered to all these various folks that have, different views into the sales cycle.
Yeah, absolutely, Darren. First, well, maybe just say hello. John and I are here in London, so great to be on the call, and great question. I think we've been looking at this multi-persona sort of buying cycle now for some considerable time. And in fact, we've been dealing with B2B over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly as we've been bringing lots more media into these experiences, particularly to do just what you described, which is to enable different actors in that process to get what they need without having to go and consult the giant binder that they've been lugging around, the poor things, for quite a long time. In fact, my first experience in B2B very long time ago was with a company in the UK called RS Components that had 1.5 million products in a catalogue that you had to, it was nearly 4 foot high, I think, when you stacked them all up. So hopefully those days are gone, and actually what we can replace them with are really technology assistance at every step in that journey, whether that be finding the right product, whether it be getting a hold of the technical specifications you need, whether it be answering the questions that you have, or servicing the customer in the field.
We lost you on audio there for a moment, James.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
We're back. We're back. Sorry. So yeah, I just finished up there by saying, hopefully the way in which we can do this in a headless way in particular is very much about servicing all these different actors in the process and delivering them the content they need at exactly the time that they need it to facilitate whatever their role is, whether that be internal or external.
Yeah. And I think that is, some of these personas is really what drives some of the needs for systems that can deliver the content or commerce type information or even transactional components through APIs into these touch points. And, I think of, you certainly have the folks that might be an engineer, for example, that is traditionally diving into those binders to get understanding of various specifications on a product, et cetera. But you might have others that, simply want to quickly peruse schematics or various even, illustrations or imagery to understand, how it might, how a product might interact in their environment or in some of the places that they work. And then I think that the post-sale too is just support now where, I was pretty excited recently picking up a pair of headphones that that are Alexa enabled and actually can also talk to Siri and Google Assistant. And so, you start thinking about a field technician and some of these folks that are out and about, right? Being able to interact with the same information hands-free, right? Not necessarily being mobile enabled or having, one of those giant wristbands that they sometimes carry, or the nearly luggable tablet because it's been, padded to extend its lifespan. They're going to be able to just click a button on their headset or start talking and say, hey, what is the length of this product, for example? Maybe we're trying to figure something out, or do I have any more in the truck?
Absolutely. And I think the point you made that this is a generation where they've been used to having Google for everything, that have grown up with a phone in their hands, for good or bad. Are very used to being out, if you're in the field as a technician and you're trying to solve a problem, your first instinct won't be to pick up the big bulky laptop. It will be, let me find that really quickly via a mobile app or, as you say, ideally in a hands-free way, or it might even be hands-free and app, because of course you can be receiving information and viewing something that is quite detailed and technical on a screen. I think all of those things are quite hard to do in the old world.
Yes.
And the great news about this transition into headless architecture is that actually it's really suitable for solving these problems.
Yeah. And I think part of getting to this digital transformation, truly having a digital enterprise, is really recognizing what the buyers are demanding and expecting today. When you have 61% of all B2B transactions starting online, it means that there's someone you don't necessarily know about yet that is trying to understand your product and service better, getting up to speed, evaluating those specifications, trying to interrogate a product to see maybe if it'll work with something that they're building in a larger system. And so if you are, kind of have that virtual desert, which I kind of look at some of these sites that I've seen where it's just, I got to find PDF files and then I'm clicking through them and trying to scan, 400-page documents in a reader. You're not really taking advantage of that opportunity, nor really serving them with what they're doing. But I think, some of the exciting things is that there are a lot of leaders out there. We've found, 42% of B2B companies, for example, using chatbots and saying, hey, someone is beyond that, on the other side of that digital experience, and how might I engage them in an more immediate way? And then taking that even more forward on the leader front is, going beyond the specification, going beyond someone requesting perhaps, the length, depth, and width of a product or something, and starting to even take advantage of technology like augmented reality, where they can start to see how products might interact with the environment that they're going to be, whether it's, a restaurateur that is just trying to figure out if a particular espresso machine is going to fit on their counter, or
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, absolutely. And as you rightly alluded to at the beginning of the discussion, many of these things have been trialed in B2C environments. So a lot of this sort of technology is being tested. It's being bought, down to a reasonable price point by consumers adopting them. So I think there's a great opportunity to reinvent the way in which all of these activities are taking place, make them more efficient, make them more accurate, and ultimately make them sort of more fulfilling. Ultimately,
Yeah. So let's bring this to life a little bit. I'm going to share a couple customer stories and what we've seen some of our customers doing, and then we'll show you some examples of kind of some of the art of the possible here too. So one of them, first up, that I'll talk through is a customer of ours called Keysight Technologies, and this is one of those manufacturers that really has been going through the journey of digital transformation. They've been in business a long time. It's an American company that manufactures electronics test and measurement equipment, as well as software. And so they've, moving towards many solutions that could even become subscriptions and things like that. It's an S&P 500 company. So this company with about $3 billion in annual turnover on revenue. And, they've got, it's a high-tech company, a lot of patents, a lot of innovation. So their products are going to be, high consideration purchases, a lot of detail desired by the buyers. And so some of the challenges they've been working through is figuring out, how do you make that transition from, the big binder that got digitized and making folks really dig through all that rich information that is relevant to their product and that shows the prowess of the technologies that they've created and invented. And allow it to be pulled forward in various channels and for those various personas in such a way that matches the expectation of both the resellers that they participate with and to some extent some of the direct customers that they engage with as well, some of their larger buyers. So one of the things that they've been working on is really stepping back and going, okay, a traditional phase one that many have done is the website and then having the catalog up there and having some of the information shared in a more that binders type style, to now starting to look at these complex businesses, look at the full service of it, and have been creating experiences to not only enable the content to be accessed faster, but some of the new personas.
Thanks, Darren. I think that's a cracking example. I think one of the ones that we wanted to talk about was one that's close to our hearts because it really uses part of our platform, the dynamic media parts of it, in a very innovative way. So Heritage are a MRO business. They're looking after lots of field service engineers that are out solving problems for their customers. And they have adopted the dynamic media platform, which I'm going to ask John to explain next to me in a second. But the real use case for them was they realized that if you are out in the field, and there's an app version of this and a very nice mobile website, so it's not just that desktop view that you see here. What the field service engineers really needed was absolute confidence that what they were ordering was the right part. And of course, to do that, there are many specifications you can search for on the site to understand whether the motor or the replacement, elements of whatever it is you're fixing are the right ones. But it's actually requires a little bit of visual inspection for a field service engineer to be really confident that it's absolutely the right thing. And of course, if you're out in the middle of the countryside somewhere and you're a long way from the depot, you don't want to get an order wrong. Because if you get an order wrong, it could cost you days of time. And of course, the business that you're trying to service may be down for that period of time. So we worked with another partner of ours based up in Chicago that did a lot of work around the photography and the 360, so the spin photography in particular. So Snap 36 have a whole studio that they can sort of portably take around. They'll drop into the warehouse and they'll put all of your components, millions of them perhaps, on a 360 turntable, and they can do 720 as well, so they can do sort of spin and up and over, so you get a kind of full 72 image, multi-dimensional sort of view of the product. And you might think this is slightly odd for things like screws or little tiny components like resistors, but the effect on conversion has been absolutely astounding, because it's all about confidence in the buying cycle. So John, just explain, I've mentioned a few things like dynamic media and headless. What is it about dynamic media that kind of makes all this work?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, you need APIs to allow you to ingest the huge number of images that are generated by this process.
Yeah.
And that's got to be done in a very automated way. You can't have someone doing that manually, going in front of a screen, uploading those images one by one.
No, you're right.
It would take forever to do that. It's just impossible. So the first thing that we've done in this situation is take the headless approach around the APIs for ingestion. And that means that then we can build very sophisticated workflows that are based on every single business that we deal with to pull in their assets, make the joins that are required for the user experience, but do it in a way that doesn't require any human intervention.
Yeah.
We were literally talking about tens of millions of images, tens of millions of content assets being drawn into the platform and assembled and then delivered out in the cloud for delivery in the user experience itself. To do that, you need APIs. You can't do it in the human way. And the other key thing about dynamic media is one of making sure that you've got the master assets for the media and the definition of the content in a format neutral form. So by doing that, it means that then we can access those assets completely dynamically in any shape, size, or form that we want. So if you want to do a zoom, you can use a very large image and then do all of the zooming and cropping into that image so you can see it. We can use the content asset part of the system to allow us to join and stitch those images together so you can get that smooth kind of spin and rotate on the images. And also we can group them into sets as well. So we can group in video and other assets as well. So you can basically contain an entire user experience that can help you make a critical decision about the components that you want to select, all from making it headless and delivering it through APIs.
Very good, great, there you go. So we're actually going to show a few of these things in a minute, but I think before we get there, we're going to have a quick look at one of the examples. Now let me just whiz through a couple of slides before we get to that example set. When we look at a diagram like this, there are two elements that we're looking at here, front-end agnostic and API driven. I think, John, you've just sort of picked up on a couple of pieces there, and these two things really work together to build an experience that works everywhere, but not only works everywhere, is contextually relevant for that particular interaction. So front-end agnostic is absolutely critical these days. The range of different channels that Darren talked about earlier, the way these devices are evolving, not just to become sort of single use cases where you've got, maybe a mobile app or maybe a voice interaction, but you might have a combination of the two, or all those things might be happening in the context of a vehicle or something like that. So this ability to deliver content in a presentation neutral way, John, is absolutely critical, isn't it, for supporting that type of interaction?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing about headless is that format neutral approach. It's not sending HTML as you would in the old world, or sending any particular format that can only be used in one channel. It's about making sure that, for instance, using JSON as a data transport there to deliver to all these different devices.
Absolutely. And then the other side to it, as we said, is building things in an API kind of way. And I think often people talk about these things as API first, and I get some questions myself. I'm sure, Darren, you get some as well, that sort of question the validity of that. Why does it need to be built this way? What's the point of that? And I think the argument that we always have, interested in your thoughts on this one, Darren, is that really, if you're going to do a lot of automation and you're going to join systems together in a really seamless way and deliver the kind of bespoke workflows these use cases need, you really need that approach.
Yeah, I mean, this is what has been, for me, fun collaborating with you all and working through some of these customer problems, because I think the way we've solved this in the past from an industry perspective is there's been a number of services out there that you could take advantage of that would have some of these basic components, that might be like a spin set or something. But the way, you guys have really partnered with the requirements around commerce and understand that it's just as important that maybe I can pull the pricing information into that digital media element or additional product information like specifications, going to that design win kind of model, right? Where a lot of the consumption and the early flow is an engineer on the other end that wants to be able to not only see something more visual than they have been able to in the past with the PDF or the binder, but then also be able to, get that other content that could be prose in some cases, right? Some good copy that maybe explains something better. Or some of those details like, lengths and heights and specifications. So that's where I think you have to be able to bring all of that forward and to your point, in a front end agnostic way.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, I think what we've been talking about as a solution set is very much bringing this content and commerce concept that has been so successful really in consumer e-commerce and make that really a reality for B2B businesses. And I think this just comes right back to the comment you made at the beginning of the presentation, Darren, which was, the buyers that you're dealing with here are not some separate individuals that live in B2B land. They are B2C consumers. And as B2C consumers, they spend their lives interacting with social channels. They're expecting to find social proof around purchases. They interact with your brand across lots of different touch points. And they're not going to be content, not just with the binder, but the old school, order taking, B2B commerce experience, Darren, that we may, at our ripe old ages be familiar with of old. It's just not going to cut it, right? No, not at all. So, John, when we're talking about combining content and commerce in this way, it's sort of a different model. I think some people struggle a little bit with where does the user experience live and all that sort of stuff. How should they think about this?
Yeah, right now there's a transition in the technology space, particularly around the web-based technologies that people are using to build apps, and things are being built as applications. And as such, the older model around the page paradigm that you used to be familiar with, where you could just create some little blocks and pipe in data from somewhere through an SDK, has changed. Now you basically get a whole set of APIs, both content and commerce APIs, and then have to join them in the experience. But that experience is no longer a page. It tends to be a much more interactive approach and requires other pieces around that as well, such as taxonomies and how's the componentry assembled, who's managing that componentry, and how does the business user ultimately manage the experience. So it's not just about just building that experience, but it's also providing the tools and ultimately the APIs that drive those tools to actually manage the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the key things, Darren, that we've been talking about, certainly in terms of integrations, is making that a whole product, for business users, right? If you're going to sit there and look at how you manage these experiences all day, you need to have some things to do them in. So I think one of the things we're going to have a look at in a little bit is sort of how we think about some of that tooling from a content perspective, just to really, reassure folks that going headless isn't about losing all that stuff. It's about gaining all this flexibility, agility, speed, and flexibility, but without losing any of the sort of administrative capability.
Yeah, and look forward to showing some of that, because I can say as a marketer and CMO, that becomes important in this space. The first instinct is kind of how am I going to maintain some kind of control over these customer experiences, and yet manage these touch points that they're just so radically different than what I've had with the web paradigm. And so I think that you guys have been a little ahead of this game and thinking through how do you still enable business users to facilitate those experiences and push content out to some of them. So I think it'd be great to show us some of that.
Good, I certainly will. Let me just flip along. I've managed to skip over that. There we go. We're back again. So this is talk me through the app part of this piece, Darren, and I'll talk through the content hub and then segue into a few other screens.
Yeah, so we recently introduced a reference experience model where we wanted to, we believe all of our capabilities need to be API first. So that's the, our mantra, kind of like the mobile first mantra, but we said, it's beyond mobile first, it's about being API first, so that any touch point, whether it's, voice or various IOs that we, aren't accustomed to, just not a mouse or keyboard, or even touch screen, anything could be able to engage them. And this also allowed us to show, bring some light to kind of the art of the possible and help folks that are making this transition, see some of the value in it, see how to do it. It's the age old how we've all learned, being able to kind of the right click and view source and reverse engineer and things like that. Yeah. So as we did that, we also recognized that the content in this was really important. And there's some of the minimal components of, delivery from a performance standpoint, and having that speed, that snappiness, right? We've known in commerce for a long time that those things really matter in improving conversion rate. So that was, really critical to us and something where we wanted to leverage and take advantage of Amplience for our own reference store. But then even further, being able to think through, okay, how would some of this content be set up and merchandised and copy edited, et cetera. So we have actually deployed your content hub and dynamic media capabilities into our reference store that folks can actually see out there on.
And it looks great. It's great. I've got that up and running on my phone, and it works very nicely to just demonstrate how easy it is to bring really rich content into the process itself, and obviously to render that content in format suitable for mobile apps and wherever else that content is.
It was interesting for us. I think it was one developer over a weekend. It wasn't even a full weekend. It was a little bit on a Saturday and a little bit on a Sunday. And
I hope it wasn't.
We were fully switched over.
You worked them hard at last. Very good. So let's drop out of this a second. So first thing to say is that we went at the whole problem of content production from the problem of the producer's perspective. So we spent a lot of time working with our customers, whether they be B2C or B2B, to try and really understand the kind of complex process that goes into planning and delivering content into any experience. So the net of that is that we got a very good view of the complex processes and all the people that are involved in that. And our research really showed that content production itself is quite broken. It's quite complex to build any sort of experience, B2C or B2B. There's an awful lot of review, staging, sort of creative asset development. Things are uploaded into various different places, pushed around. No one's quite sure they've got all that kind of thing. So what we generally found was lots of steps in the process, lots of tools, developers in the process, poor collaboration, and a sort of lack of agile working practice. And it can take some customers, weeks potentially to go from concept for a campaign or a promotion or a new piece of content to facilitate a process to live. And that, of course, in this day and age is a long time. The other thing that I think is sort of really key is that we realized that there's a huge amount of effort going into sort of delivering content in a way which is sort of time-based and time-sensitive. You're trying to get all sorts of content to line up with, your key promotional strategies in the channel and all that type of thing. So it's for us to recognize here, one of the things that we did really well was to make that really straightforward and easy in terms of how it comes together. And the way that we think about that is to take this sort of process of creating content with all of its different components, and really sort of look at, how we can improve that. And what we found was the old web CMS technologies weren't very good. DAM and CMS kind of solved the end bit of the problem. And what we really thought we should do is do this in a little bit more comprehensive way and sort of own the whole process. And to do that, we built all sorts of great tools like the planning tools, make content as data, the content hub itself, which we'll have a quick look at in a second, and ultimately use dynamic media APIs to simplify publishing workflows and all that sort of thing. So really the Amplience platform is headless, but it has a couple of components really. The content hub, which is where all the content lives, dynamic media, the APIs to get it out into all the different channels, and dynamic content, which is the content management side of the house. Let's see. Now, the first thing I thought I'd just show actually is the Heritage Park sort of viewer, because it can see it for live. So what we've got here is a 360 spin. Now, actually, some of these are 720s. I couldn't find one. They change all the time this morning, but some of them are actually up and over as well. So you can sort of see underneath and over the top. But it gives you a really good example of just how powerful that is from a field service engineer's perspective, because they can look at that and say, actually, yeah, but the one that I've just pulled out of this, air conditioner or whatever it is I'm fixing, has a slightly different attachment. So it can't be that one. Maybe it's a different. So I think this sort of visual inspection, as I said earlier, is really important. And as John alluded to, what you end up building is a media set. And this media set can be quite complex. You can have all sorts of different views. You can see here there's a little bit of calibration attached to this one. You can see it from different angles, all that kind of stuff. How all of that stuff comes together into the experience is really sort of done in our content hub. And the content hub itself is full of capabilities and tools to really simplify, as John said, the process of assembling the content and media assets that we need to power those experiences in a really dynamic and flexible way. So what I mean by this is, it looks like a dam, it sort of behaves like a dam. That's because it is a dam in some regards. But it also has lots of capability to push content out to the edge of the CDNs and make sure that content is properly optimized for where it needs to go. So as you can see here, we've got potentially thousands, if not millions of assets in an account. It's super fast to find those things. I've just picked up the things here, the images, videos, and spin. The great news, if we go into products here, let's have a look at this. This sneaker is, I think what we have here is a spin set. So if I go into preview, what you'll see is this particular spin set has got 4 different views of this, and you can see that when they're all combined together, you can sort of see different angles of the shoe or whatever it happens to be in this particular case. In fact, if I can move that along, we'll see all the different pieces. So lots of preview, lots of ability to sort of pull these things together into different types of views. The other thing that we do in this to make it really simple for marketers is we start to generate all sorts of metadata schemas that enable us to join products together with other products in real time. So as you can see in here, we've got a couple of things that the image recognition has found. John, do you want to talk about that for a second? Because this is kind of powerful feature. But
yes.
Actually, if I found one that did, there we go. Yeah. Let's go into here.
And so we can enable image recognition on any one of our asset stores. And as images are actually uploaded, it inspects the image and then pulls out all kinds of attributes. So it will be object-based attributes. What kind of objects are relevant inside the image? So in this one, obviously, it's only on one object. But if it was a scene, it could pull out all sorts of objects like chairs. It can identify people. If the faces are involved, it can pull out faces and work out things. Are they male, female? What sort of are they happy, sad, emotional things? As well as things, if you had a loft scene, for instance, it would identify it as a loft scene. It would show you. It would say there was plywood, that there was a guy there with a drill. It can basically pull out all the objects and intelligently work out all the scenes, give you all of the coordinates for all of the objects. So if you want to then use that to overlay additional pieces of content, you can. So it's really quite sophisticated.
Yeah, so that sort of auto tags the images themselves, and then what we can do is we can start to edit some of that metadata. Now I'm just going to pick this image because we're going to open an app called Point of Interest. And what Point of Interest is really good at doing is taking that one single media asset and enabling you to auto crop it for different viewports. So you can see on the right hand side here we've got some examples. This is some different aspect ratios. Depending on what sort of element within the scene I want to view, I can move my focal point around. And what that will do is it will automatically crop and scale the image in real time as it's requested and deliver that back into your mobile device or your AR headset, whatever it happens to be, in exactly the right format. So great news about all of the stuff that we're building here. It's headless. It sort of delivers the images and the metadata as APIs. And then, of course, the app itself can query them, find ask for the particular, give it the viewport credentials, it can pull that stuff back. If you wanted to create images that have elements in it that are interactive, so say you've got a complex parts diagram, you want to highlight different parts of it and actually do something like add a hotspot, so you've got an interactive element on that, so that you could click on that, find out what that part was or whatever it happened to be. Then you could add, your SKU reference in here. That will be surfaced back through the API, and Darren, you folks can pick that up.
I was going to say, this is near and dear to my heart on the experience-driven commerce side, right? Just being able to make these wonderful assets actually have context, right? That I can touch, click, and interact with, and bring forward product information, and even all the way to the commerce transaction itself. So
exactly. So it's all of that type of capability. There are all sorts of apps that you can actually load into the platform that provide everything from the management of SVGs. So we do an awful lot of work around really intelligent images, so that if you're delivering content or media down to a particular distributor, and you don't necessarily want to create an asset that is specific to each of them, you can actually template it as an SVG. We can overlay things in real time, so we can generate views in real time. We can generate images that are personalized, because we can drop them into email, and we can sort of drive parameters into them. There's all sorts of things that the headless nature of the platform really facilitates. And it's all about taking the pain away of producing that experience and making it as flexible and as effective as it possibly can be. Does that help, Darren, to illustrate a few things?
absolutely.
Very good. There's all sorts, folks, we can talk about. I'm conscious a little bit of time. Darren, shall I pop this back to you guys? And I think we're going to run into some Q&A, aren't we?
Thanks, everyone. So we have a couple of questions. The first question is from Ben, which is related to APIs. And the question is, a lot of full stack platforms offering APIs in one way or another. Is there anything we should be looking into in particular, any requirements, any difference between APIs we should be aware of?
I'd like to start with that one, and James, you can probably add to it. One of the things that I found as a practitioner, a number of years ago, trying to accomplish some of these newer experience was that, it's kind of the age-old, the devil's in the details challenge, where in many cases, I think that you got a lot of companies out there, particularly now, that they know there's this demand, and there's many of their current customers and new prospective customers are all trying to meet their buyers' expectations, create these rich experiences. And so, everyone says they have an API, and everyone can say they have an API, but what you really have to try to interrogate and investigate further is, can you support all of the experiences that you want? So, as we touched on, even just in that last little there for a brief moment, one of my favorite things is, you've got these image assets with multiple products in them often, right? That connect to multiple product IDs and multiple SKUs. And so, can you bring forward product titles? Can you bring forward short versions of the description that may just hover in a small pop-out? And then more importantly, is their ability to add to cart and actually facilitate the transaction at that point of inflection versus, having to go back to kind of the, some other experience. And, we, interestingly, Instagram struggled with this, where they started as they rolled out some of their commerce capabilities there. They originally envisioned that they said, it's really important to us. We have this user experience in the native app, and we want the consumer, the shoppers, to be able to engage in that native experience and not have to kind of pop out to a traditional website that might be pulling down into my Instagram app. But they struggled to find enough companies that really weren't able to do that. So that's one thing, is kind of look at the breadth of, how much of the information can be exposed, how much of the content transactions can be exposed. The other thing that I think is important, the second big category that I've found, and something we really focus on, is that we've learned from pioneering this over the years. It's not just the kind of production API that you have to be thinking about. It's all those staging environments and all those other experiences, through your development life cycle. They all have to be able to, allow the business to, before a product launch, look at how that product is going to launch in all their channels, engage with it from a user acceptance testing perspective. And in many cases, some of the old legacy platforms, they just haven't really been fully enabled for the entire journey of how you manage that customer experience. Whether it's starting in development through QA all the way through production. So those are big two categories that I would say, everyone should have top of mind to inspect as you evaluate various solutions out there.
I think it's a very comprehensive answer. I'm not sure what else we're going to have done. John, what John would like to drop in?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at getting a platform with a set of APIs that you want to run a full headless system, and first of all, you've got to look at API coverage. So if it's a native headless system, then it's going to have complete API coverage. Every single thing you can do in the platform, you can do through an API. There are many other systems that are not, haven't come from the cloud native. They come from maybe an on-prem or a previous kind of iteration, more of a monolith. And what happens is that they just can't achieve the full API coverage because a lot of those APIs have been interwoven between all the different layers in the platform. And what ends up happening is you go headless, you lose features. So I think API coverage is one of the first things you should look at. And then the next one is around standards. And just saying you have an API is not good enough. I mean, what are the standards? What are the standards in terms of is it delivering JSON, the formats, etc.? And then I would say the final thing is around performance. So the API has to be able to scale to your experience and has to deliver the right SLA and the right performance. Otherwise, your user experience will actually degrade.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, John.
Okay, another question we have from Martina. I generally get the appeal of headless, but I'm not sure where to get started for my organization. It looks scary. What do you recommend?
Looks scary. What I recommend, I think what you need to do is get some, mature headless API first solutions like ourselves into the room and really talk the problem through with you. I think it's, ultimately it really depends a lot on your environment, your requirements, the way in which you want to solve the problem. I think headless is all about enabling things to happen in a really cost-effective and agile way. I don't think there's anything to be afraid of so much as just making sure really that you understand properly what you're trying to achieve, and working with the likes of Elastic Cloud and ourselves to really understand how that solution should come together.
Yeah, and there's some methodologies out there that are now starting to gain some good traction, like design thinking, and a lot of them, if you look at it, it's about this kind of concepts of empathy mapping. And so what I would challenge is to step back and think about, going back to that list of collaborators, right, that are ultimately participating in buying your products or buying your services, and challenge yourself to think really in their shoes. Flush out the day in the life model, right? Understand that persona more, and then challenge yourself and go, do they really want to interact with this information, this content, or facilitate this transaction through, a desktop browser? Do they have other, what are they doing in their day-to-day? Could it perhaps be better served in, voice activated or on some smaller screen or, a larger kiosk? And then I think as you begin to do some of that empathy mapping and realize what the environment is of those individual stakeholders, then you start to push past, us pushing our website out to all of those touch points isn't really going to work anymore. And then you let that be the driver from the business side, which then I think helps to bring, both parties to the table, both in the technical and the business, to get you to the experience that's going to serve ultimately your end customer the best. And then I think, what you'll find is you'll just land on some of these solution approaches.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Darren. Empathy mapping, personas, look at really the breadth and sophistication of that experience. And if it's any more, as you say, then straight up desktop browser, and this is a great fit.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question. So the last question is from Sanjay. And the question is, can any platform be used for B2B? Can you highlight some of the B2B specific capabilities we should look into, some of the best practices, requirements?
I'll leave you to lead on that one.
Yeah, I can certainly start with it. I think again, kind of going to the persona concept here. We hear a lot right now in the B2B commerce space, and I think even in this digital transformation with content, about that there's this expectation for B2C like experiences. And I would agree that there are. We have all become accustomed to some of these consumer experiences in our life, and to have to, interact with old user interfaces or things that just clearly don't show any empathy for the user, that's not going to serve anyone well. But I think it's also making sure that you are, can you take care of business how you normally have to take care of it? Because if your digital experience ultimately is ending with or has a number of milestones in it where you're having to kind of go back out to a person to intervene because the digital experience couldn't facilitate it, whether it's supporting and recognizing various payment methods, supporting or recognizing that there may be multiple parties, recognizing that similar to how some of us use the cart for a wish list, but that someone that's in a procurement seat, frankly, they really don't care how pretty the experience is. They need to get through their job. They're task oriented, and they want to be able to manage many different carts and orders and be able to pull a lot of them up. So I think it's, again, just stepping back and going, am I going to be able to support, truly to get through this digital transformation, that end user, my buyer, my partner, resellers, et cetera? Or have I just created, places where they still have to pick up the phone or do an email or things like that? And so it's really about making sure you eventually eliminate those and really put your end buyer in the driver's seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that absolutely nails the question. I think from our perspective, the great news is that content, to some degree, is content. Many of the processes that we support in the tool sets are very much sort of set up for you, whether it's B2C or B2B. What we tend to find in the B2B environments is there tends to be more products at times, significantly more products. In fact, millions as opposed to thousands in a catalog.
And a lot more detail behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a great deal of automation that can go on to support that. The other thing is you typically know who is in your experience because they're often logged in. So the ability that you have then to target content goes up significantly. But if you have the ability to target content, then you also need more content by default to actually make that happen. So you need an efficient content production process. Otherwise, you really can't service the customer in the really kind of highly personalized way that they also want to be served in. And as a result, you need something like Ampers that will take much of the pain away from content production so that your team, without adding any more bodies, can actually deliver those kinds of experiences.
Thank you. And at that time, the Q&A session is over. And if you want to learn more about the headless commerce and content, please feel free to come and grab these digital assets. We have a copy of Paradigm B2B Combine Report waiting for you at elasticpath.com. And it provides overview of commerce vendors in the B2B space. And also feel free to go to mplans.com and grab the latest version of an mplans headless white paper. At that time, thanks everyone. Thank you for your time. Thanks Darren, thanks James, thanks John. Have a great day.
Thanks folks.
Thanks.
Cheerio.